We take people we're angry at and we put them in prison. Prison should be for people that we're afraid of. You know, you go to prison, you learn how to steal, cheat, lie, manipulate, con, gamble, and most importantly, you learn you have a verbal disagreement with somebody, they gotta get cut. Is that really what I want back on the streets of my community? No. Okay.
Not so long ago, it would have been hard to imagine that Bernie Kerik would be advocating for criminal justice reform. That's because for nearly 2 decades, his job was putting people behind bars. He served in the New York Police Department and as a corrections officer, and eventually ran Rikers Island Penitentiary, before becoming New York City's top cop. But prison changes a man. That's something Kerik found out the hard way in 2009 when he was sentenced to 4 years in a federal penitentiary after pleading guilty to 8 felony charges including corruption, tax fraud, and lying to White House officials. The reason he was talking to White House officials in the first place is that in 2004, President Bush nominated Kerik to head the Department of Homeland Security.
Bernie Kerik is one of the most accomplished and effective leaders of law enforcement in America.
Just a week later, Kerik withdrew his nomination over questions about the immigration status of his nanny. And as we now know, that turned out to be just the beginning of his problems. We first met Kerik in 2008 when he was in the middle of his battle with federal prosecutors. He was calm, cool, and collected, if not a bit bitter.
Every cockroach will come out when you're down. They don't have the balls and they don't have the courage to attack you up front.
Now, after serving 3 years and 11 days in a minimum security facility in Cumberland, Maryland, he says he sees the way we punish people in a whole new light. He's started a nonprofit organization working for criminal justice reform and has written a book about his time in prison called From Jailer to Jailed.
Yeah, you gotta hold the book. Our criminal justice system is supposed to treat everyone equally, not to insult anyone in here, but if you believe it does, you're either stupid or naive.
We went back to Kerik's house in Jersey to find out if he really is a changed man. So you go to prison for 3 years, during which time you seem to have a revelation about the criminal justice system, and you come out and you have a new book and you start a nonprofit. And I mean, you've pointed out that being a convicted felon limits one's career opportunities. America loves reformed sinners, and this is, you know, just basically one of the few careers you can go into. Is this opportunism, or is this a sincere change of heart for you?
One, the coalition for criminal justice that I've created, I haven't made a dime from. Not a dime. Nothing. In fact, I think at most, I've had 2 train tickets that it's paid for me to go to Washington out of probably 60 trips. And number 2, for me to make any money from my book, real money, I'd have to sell more copies than the Bible. It's not happening. This isn't about money. This isn't about opportunism. This isn't about none of that. This is about flaws and failures that I saw within the system, myself, that I think have to be changed. And there are people that will say, why do we listen to him? I think you listen to me because I've run 2 of the biggest law enforcement organizations in this country, and I've also been on the inside. No one with my experience, my background, and my success has ever been inside.
Can you give us some specifics in terms of what you learned being in prison versus, you know, career fighting crime?
The one thing that a cop or a law enforcement executive doesn't see and doesn't understand is the destruction that the system causes to individuals, to families, to children, especially children. You don't see that. You know, you're focused on one primary function, and that is to enforce the laws of this country. You want to take the bad guys off the street, and I've done a lot of that, and I did it really well. But then I went to prison. And when I was in prison, I met young black men charged with a conspiracy, 10 years. They didn't have any drugs on them. 15 years, 5 grams of cocaine. I met commercial fishermen that caught too many fish. They're sitting in federal prison. I met a young guy that sold a whale's tooth on eBay. They put him in federal prison. And I came to realize very quickly, there's a whole bunch of people in prison that didn't necessarily need prison to pay for their mistakes. We have evolved into a society that we take people we're angry at and we put them in prison. Prison should be for people that we're afraid of. You know, you go to prison, you learn how to steal, cheat, lie, manipulate, con, gamble, and most importantly, you learn you have a verbal disagreement with somebody, they gotta get cut. Is that really what I want back on the streets of my community? No.
So can you tell us a bit about your time in prison?
There were 300 people in the camp where I was. The reality is, a minimum security camp is pretty much an unsecure facility. The doors are open, there's no locks, there's no fences. You're there basically on an honor system. You have 1 or 2 COs that control the compound. You have a counselor in the building only for 8 hours during the day, and then the rest of the day, those inmates in that building are on their own.
For most people, sounds like white-collar prison, club-fed, that sort of thing. It doesn't sound like a
Here's what
really
I suggest. Here's what I
punishment.
suggest.
Yeah.
Those people on the outside that say it's a white-collar facility, it's club-fed, it's a cushy spot. The Ritz-Carlton is a pretty cushy hotel, probably one of the most cushy in the world. Go to the Ritz-Carlton, walk into the bathroom, which is probably bigger than my cubicle, lock yourself in there for a year, and come out and tell me how cushy it was. That's nonsense. The only people that would find a minimum security facility cushy is somebody that just came out of a medium or a maximum security facility. I don't think anybody understands how profound freedom is. The lack of freedom for someone that's never experienced it is far more profound than you can even explain. You live in an environment that is completely stagnant, and your whole world around you goes on without you in it. Your kids grow, they graduate from school, and then you have major family events that happen, like you have a death in your family, and there ain't a damn thing you can do for your family. My brother-in-law died while I was in prison. He was 50 years old, and there wasn't nothing I could do to help his wife. All I could do was sit on the other end of a phone and listen to my wife and all my family in the background screaming and wailing and crying. And it makes you hate the government. It makes you hate society in general. We're paying for guys to sit in a minimum security camp and do nothing but work out, read, and play games. To me, that's pretty stupid. We're turning them into morons. That's what we do. We're turning them into morons, and we're paying for it on top of it. The BOP, by law, has to give you programs to reduce recidivism and rehabilitate you. ACE programs, they call them. Okay, we had 18 when I was in Cumberland. And out of those 18, I'll give you a couple. Chess, checkers, quilting was an ACE class. Are you kidding me? Navigating eBay.
Navigating eBay?
Navigating eBay, there were no computers. But there's a far more important issue. They're supposed to be learning something to reduce recidivism. He's a convicted felon. He can't get a job.
Let's talk about that. I mean, what does that label, convicted felon, mean to you in your case? I mean, how has that changed your life?
Forget my case. Convicted felon, anyone that's convicted of a felony in this country, it's a black cloud that hangs over you until the day you die. Your debt to society is never paid. You pay, you are punished until the day you die.
But punished in what ways?
First of all, your possibilities of employment are 70 to 80% diminished based on your conviction. I know people with master's degrees, doctorates, and bachelor's degrees, they can't get work because of that conviction. And then you take these young kids that come out of the ghetto, they don't have a college degree, they don't have a high school degree. a lot of them. Even if they get it inside, I used to teach a life lessons class, and the kids would come to me and I would push them to get their GED. And they would look at me and they'd say, listen, I'm black, I'm a convicted felon, I'm doing time for drugs. I can get all the degrees I want, I'm never getting a job. And the unfortunate, sad thing in life is, he's right. He's right. At what point does a person pay his debt to society? The Constitution says the punishment must fit the crime. In this country, the punishment does not fit the crime.
But isn't the threat of prison also designed to deter these crimes in the first place?
There's a whole bunch of people in prison today that made mistakes, not knowing they were committing a crime. We're putting them in prison, turning them into criminals for ethical violations, for regulatory violations, for civil violations. We turn them into convicts, and then we guarantee that they're personally and professionally annihilated, where they can never come back into the U.S. workforce again. That's not good for America.
I guess here it sounds like you're separating out kind of white-collar crime versus violent crime. So basically arguing that those who have previously demonstrated some value to society should be subject to a different set of rules than others.
No. The reality is everybody should be subjected to the same rule, but they're not. And we've seen that in black and white incarceration for drug crimes. Blacks go to prison for longer sentences 6 times more than whites. How's that possible? Why is it possible? Why is it allowed? On violent crime issues, we have to protect society, put those people in prison. But you know how many drug offenders, first-time, non-violent, low-level drug offenders are being sentenced to 10, 15 years? They never had a problem with the law before? That's absurd. It shouldn't happen.
But what's the alternative then?
There's a number of alternatives. A commercial fisherman that catches too many fish, suspend his license.
But that case is, I forget the gentleman's name, you refer to him in the book. I mean, you make it sound like he just kind of accidentally caught too many fish, but he was convicted
I don't give
of
a damn how many fish he caught.
But it was like a poaching, he was a poacher, right? I mean,
all right, first of all, there's a couple issues. The commercial fisherman that catches too many fish, if he accidentally caught the fish or he intentionally caught too many fish or whatever the case may be, there's a way to deal with it without turning him into a convicted felon. Suspend his license, fine him, hit him in the pocketbook, take his fish several times, make him do community service, make him do something, but we don't do that. We take a whole bunch of those guys that catch too many fish and we turn them into convicted felons. And you know what we do? We take the boat, we take his license forever. So he's punished forever. The guy started fishing at 17. He's now 55. It's the only thing he's ever done in his whole life. So we guarantee for the rest of his life, not for that 18 months he's in prison, for the rest of his life, he can't do the only job he knows. He loses the boat, the 6 people on the boat lose their job, the wife loses the job, and it goes on and on.
Right. I mean, let's take 2 examples. You have Joe the fisherman who accidentally caught too many fish and is in violation of the Lacey Act, and you fine him and you hurt his business and he feels the sting and he learns his lesson
Right.
and he pays the price. But versus Phil the fisherman who is actively engaged in a very organized poaching operation from which he profited millions of dollars every year, who takes a financial penalty as just kind of the cost of doing business. It makes it sound like just kind of a tax on crime and for only the times that a person does actually get caught.
There should be due process. It's sort of like when you correct your child. You correct your child, you tell your child don't do this, and you smack him once on the hand, and he kind of gets it. But maybe he doesn't get it. Maybe he comes back and does it again. Well, then maybe he gets 3 cracks. Or maybe he has to stand in the corner 2. Or maybe you take away his something that he loves. I think there should be due process. Guy makes a mistake, he's punished. Makes a mistake again, maybe he's punished again, maybe more severe. 3rd time, all right, Then you go after it criminally. We don't do none of that. Right to prison. Let's go right to prison. Bang. Everybody goes to prison. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that people can't be punished. People that threaten society, violent predators, people that engage in violent behavior, they may deserve prison. They may deserve prison for a long time, maybe life. Other people, they may have to go to prison too, but not at the lengths of time we put them there. And there are many, many people that don't need prison to get it in their head they made a mistake. And nobody in Washington has figured that out yet.
My administration has taken steps on our own to reduce our federal prison population. So I signed a bill reducing the 101 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine. I've commuted the sentences of dozens of people sentenced under old drug laws that we now recognize were unfair. And yesterday I announced that I'm commuting dozens more.
Last time we met was 2008. You were pretty vocal about your lack of enthusiasm for President Obama. And I'm curious, looking back, what you think of his presidency, but especially in relation to criminal justice reform.
Look, the reality is I don't agree with much of the president's politics, but I will tell you this, I have completely supported everything he's talked about doing with regard to criminal justice reform, because I think, given what I've seen personally, criminal justice reform should be one of the top 5 domestic issues sitting on the president's desk, whether it's this president or the next president, whoever that may be.
What's your opinion of how the Republicans have responded to the president's initiatives?
I think some of the Republicans are trying to do the right thing. Last year, Van Jones, Newt Gingrich, put together a symposium in Washington. A number of Democratic congressmen and senators showed up to talk about criminal justice reform. Republicans didn't show up at all. They sent a video. To me, that sends a message. I'm a Republican. You know what? Republicans have to do more.
Right, but there's obviously something politically dangerous about taking this on as an issue. Otherwise, it would seem that you'd see presidential candidates in 2016 championing something that it could potentially improve American society and save a shit ton of money.
You know what the danger is to them, to the politicians? They're scared to death that they're going to look soft on crime. In the federal system, you've got 30,000 minimum security prisoners sitting in camps that have no locks on the doors and no fences around them. They're there on an honor system. You know how much that is in cash? That's $690 million.
Who does benefit from that?
The prison industry. They gain a real positive result, and it's all lucrative. It's an $80 billion a year industry. They're a lobbyist on top of lobbyists in Washington that are pushing for mandatory minimums, that are pushing for those minimum security camps to have as many people in them as possible. The thing that kills me is that the members of the House and Senate, they know it. They know it because those lobbyists go to them for these laws. They've got to have the courage to do their job. They've got to have the courage to do the right thing for the American people. And they got to get beyond this thing where they're scared to death to do anything because they're going to look soft on crime.
Is there a kind of a schism in people seeking criminal justice reform? I mean, with people focused on overcriminalization on one side and kind of low-level offenders on another side?
Here's the problem. They all agree to some extent that there's a problem, whether it's on the drug offense side or whether it's on the white-collar side. The key is making them come together with some real common sense change, okay? And, for example, the left, they don't want to hear about putting mens rea or intent into criminal law, in the federal law. They're giving, that's a big problem for them because they say, well, then that's an out for the regulatory violations.
What's an example of a regulatory violation?
Somebody dumps garbage into a waterway or whatever the case may be, into a stream that goes into a river that, you know, pollutes something. Okay, well, they think they should be held accountable, and they think that should be criminal. Well, first of all, it's a regulatory issue, but here's my problem with that. If the guy didn't know that he was doing that and had no criminal intent to do that, why do you turn him into a convicted felon? But that criminal intent issue also has a major impact on those young black kids, because they can get caught up in a conspiracy, a third or fourth party conspiracy. They don't even know the primary target of the investigation. They walk up on a street corner somewhere and buy a dime bag of cocaine from somebody that is a target, and they drag them into the conspiracy, and they stand them up in court and say, you know, you have to plead guilty that you intentionally possessed and, attempted to distribute 2 kilos of cocaine. That kid's never seen 2 kilos of cocaine, but they charge him with the same weight that the target's being charged with. That kind of stuff shouldn't happen, and it happens.
So what do you want to do next? I mean, after you solve criminal justice reform?
Dude, there ain't no solving that shit. I don't know. I don't know. You know, who knows? I have no idea.